What is the most corrupt thing you've ever experienced? M's guy, in the days before the internet, I got fired by a private ambulance company for using the wrong pen to fill out Medicaid forms after a run. I used a ballpoint instead of the soft tip flare pens and was immediately sacked by the owner. A few years later, I found out he was imprisoned for Medicaid fraud. Turns out the soft tip pens he provided didn't go through all the carbon copies on the forms, and he was changing the bottom sheet to show more miles and services for each ambulance run before sending them to the state. The day I used the ballpoint was for a very long ride and cost him a lot of fraudulent money. That's why he was so infuriated. I worked as a counselor at a youth shelter. Almost all the food/clothes were donated by local churches, and they didn't buy anything for the kids, so theoretically they were just paying to keep the lights on and to keep on minimum wage staff. They had a ridiculous amount of grant money, enough to cover the food/clothes plus activities for the kids, if they had to pay for those things. Yet they skimped out on essential things like training. They gave me a CP certification without ever giving me any training. The shelter had rats and roaches, and at times bedbugs. The heat was out for a month, during a blizzard, on Christmas, with girls residing at the shelter. I reported them and nothing happened, except them interrogating the entire staff to find out who snitched. So clearly a lot of people were getting paid the money that was supposed to be going to homeless youth. Worst place I ever worked. Edit. The kids were a blast though. Loved everyone that came through, and that made it a much more bearable nightmare. I won't go into details, but I work for a municipality as a fairly low-level employee. I've been offered bribes on a number of occasions to let things slide here and there. All very tempting, but I like my job too much to risk it for $20 or so. Long story short, the biggest bribe I have been offered is $1,000. I reported it to my supervisor and his response was, "Fuck dude, why didn't you take it?" I sure as hell would have. But we filed an official report. Didn't go anywhere as I didn't know the name of the people. Makes me wonder what else is going on that I don't know about. I guess I'm lucky because this wasn't that bad. My friend and I were traveling from one shitty former Soviet republic to another by train. We noticed that a more direct route would save us money, but involved travel through a third country for which we had no visas. It's only trouble if we get caught. We decided. We got caught checking tickets and passports. The kid in the shitty polyester uniform and crooked hat spotted the missing visas immediately. He said problem, big problem, and took our passports away. Time passed. After a while, the kid returned with his boss, an older version of himself in the same uniform, but nearly passed out drunk and smeared with grease. He slumped against the door, his eyes alternately swiveling and closing, as Nobodajivasafakistan rattled by the train windows. I think I tried to make my case that we had made an honest mistake. Finally, my traveling companion opened her wallet and pulled out the entire sheaf of soft currency she'd forgotten to convert and literally slammed the wad into Lieutenant Borovika's gut. He fucked off. Junior gave us our passports back and may have given us a warning. Sad thing was, they could only spend that soft currency in the country we were just coming from, which they were not citizens of. I hope they found a way to have a good time with it. An old friend of mine got a job working for a church-based charity. They would accept household donations and sell them in a thrift store they had set up to raise funds for the needy. His job was to drive around in a cube van, pick up the donated items, and deliver them to the charity. He openly bragged about picking the best items for himself and would drop them off at his house before delivering the rest of the items to the charity. I called him out on it and told him it was a bad idea seeing as his cousin and 2 aunts worked there, and put in a good word for him to get hired. That's when he told me that they've been doing the same thing for years. He told me his aunts wouldn't even keep most what they stole, rather they would sell the items at garage sales, and that it was okay because that's how they make their money. To make matters worse, they were paid in cash, so they could keep collecting welfare. Pure trash, and needless to say I have nothing to do with them anymore. Realizing that I was the only one who wasn't stealing from the company, used to work in the ID department, and over time I noticed that things were going missing. Replace a bunch of monitors in a lab, then a few weeks later notice all the old ones are back. What happened to the ones I just delivered? We don't have nearly as many of something in stock as it says on our shipping receipt. And why are we always out of service? Kits for the copy machines? Yeah, all of that was going on eBay or Craigslist or somewhere else. Didn't realize it for years. Maybe I'm just really oblivious, but the whole department was in on this. I was assaulted, threatened with death, and physically and emotionally harmed by another person. The court found him guilty and ordered him to pay €750 to the state and €10 to me. That didn't even begin to cover the costs of gas spent as a result of the attack. I've never trusted the justice system since, especially as I still freeze up every few months with nightmarish recollection/what if daydreams. I stopped trusting the justice system when I had heard a bunch of stories from people where some questions asked in earnest regarding sexual assault victims were things like, what was she wearing? That's not even mentioning the fact that male sexual assault victims are not taken seriously at all, whether it's male on male or female on male. I guess this more so applies to people in general, but it really bothers me that men are perceived as sex-hungry creatures who are always up for it, or if they were assaulted they are told they should have defended themselves or something. Really frustrating. Was at a polling place in a school where as a project in college we were doing a student voting project, letting elementary kids cast a vote for president. At this school the kids were voting at booths near where the actual voters were voting. It was pretty dead at the time I was there, until this one woman comes in with a stack of voter registration cards. She hugged the poll workers and they laughed it up. She then voted for at least 6 people who were not present to cast their own vote. She signed their name on the registrar and everything. Went back and forth from the registrar to the booth each time to cast a new ballot under someone else's name. As this was playing out I walked over to the election judge and in a nice way asked WTF. He told me, oh, it's okay, we know her, and most of those are her family members. I went outside, dialed 411 on my cell phone, smartphones were not a thing then, and got a hold of the county elections department, and they said they'd look into it. About 10 minutes later the election judge got a call on his flip phone, and said exactly what he said to me, and then hung up. Nothing ever came of it. And the more people I told the more people kept replying, well, if she knew the people then it's okay. Most countries in Africa have the most blatant public corruption out there. Here is my example. Working in the country of Chad, which I don't recommend in case anybody asks, and brought my Xbox 360 in checked baggage. Going through x-ray screening on way out of airport and almost conned out of money by the screener, but he didn't speak any English, so he gave up. 1 month later, flying out of the country you have to open all your bags before ticket counter, and they inspect 4 random things. Of course I had my Xbox 360 and conversation went like this. Corrupt inspector, Xbox. Me, yes, brought it from the States for personal use and now bringing it back. Corrupt inspector, invoice. Me, no invoice, personal use, bought in the States, and bringing it back. Corrupt inspector, no, invoice. This goes on for a couple more iterations until a local behind me pipes up. Local traveler, just pay him. Me, how much? Local traveler, just something. Ended up forking over 10,000 XFA to him in front of everybody, roughly $15. Corrupt inspector, okay, no problem, while zipping back up my checked baggage. My wife and I bought a house. The landlord wanted access to the apartment we were living in the meantime, so he could renovate it and sell it at an exorbitant price. We told him multiple times that we were going to keep and maintain the apartment to the end of our lease, only had 23 days left, and that we were going to clean it, etc., like normal. He didn't like that. So he performed an illegal lockout, then charged us a $750 cleaning fee saying we left it a mess, the entire $1,900 rent for the last month, and attempted to keep our $1,900 security deposit. What he didn't know is I'm not one of these uninformed foreigners he's used to threatening. I live in New York City in Bensonhurst, which has a heavy Russian/Pole/Italian and Chinese immigrant population. I know the law damn well. So I went to the apartment and recorded him in the act of locking me out. I'm big black dude, so I was showing restraint by not manhandling him, since I'd immediately be found at fault. Then I gathered every ounce of proof I could, built a case, and sued his ass. We also hit him with 311 hazard reports, and he got charged a shit ton for repairs. Lead. It was one spot in the closet, but he was still charged. After about 2 months of back and forth, he acquiesced and settled out of court, giving us back the full last month and full security without charging us a cleaning fee. Know the law, people. Don't let anyone try to pull one over on you.